morning. What a start to another beautiful week here at Truly Foundation. All right. Yeah, good morning. Good morning and welcome to another episode of, not episode, but another session of Truly Foundation and a Course in Miracles. And good morning, my name is Oliver Blue, and I am delighted to be your temporary guide this morning as we look into part 2 of Workbook Lesson 167, Out of A Course in Miracles. And I'm delighted to be your temporary guide, your temporary coach. But I'm a student of spirituality just like you. I'm just sitting in this seat as a temporary teacher. And I am so happy, I'm so delighted to be in this role. But most importantly, I am your permanent, everlasting brother. I am yourself. I am you. Why do I say that? Because we all living things share the one life that is. All living things share the one being that exists, the one and only being that exists. All living things share the one love. And all of us share the one life. And we universally would call that life God. Or we put other labels on it, other names on it. But what we call it is not as important as what it is. And like they say, it is what it is. That there is one that's breathing all of us. There is a oneness that breathes all of us. We're not separate beings breathing separate breath, even though it appears through these bodies that we are separated, we are individuated with a personal name and a personal history and a personal social security number, living in a world of multiplicity. All this appears around us as we observe it. We notice what we're noticing. We notice the world and all that has happened in it. We notice our own personal world and our own personal experiences and our own personal timeline and our own personal history. And we notice what we're noticing. That this appearance of this personal self that seems so real, but has a history of being so temporal. As you know, like they say, there's two things that guarantee: taxes and what? Death. That's what is said. But is that the truth? We're gonna get into that a little bit today. But again, what we share here on Truly Foundation is advanced spirituality. What is advanced spirituality? No more than what it said. It is advanced spiritual teaching that is designed to help humanity to wake up to the reality of their true identity, of our true identity. Advanced spirituality includes our response to the scripture that says that we should not be conformed to this world, but we should be transformed by the renewing of our mind. So our focus here at Truly Foundation is on the transformation of the mind. Why does the mind need transforming? Why? Because the mind at some point got engaged with an idea of separation, that it separated itself from its source, from its creator, and made this individual self that is separate from everyone else, even separate from its source, even separate from its creator. And even in that separation, a whole world was created. A whole thought system was created, as we've taught here. That thought system we call the ego thought system, that is based on the belief in separation, based on belief that sin is real, which result in guilt, which result in fear. And fear has torment. Fear produces suffering. And so thus we see the history of human suffering. It all was birthed out of a belief system. And in most cases, in our traditional religion, it is believed that, God is the author of all of this. And so it conjures up the idea that, that the God of love is not really the God of love, but the God of wrath, but God of anger. And so to the point where it would completely obliterate its own creation. But we have learned in these 167, 68 days of studying A Course in Miracles, which is the main source of reference that we use for the purpose of mind reversal, for the purpose of transforming our minds to align with the truth that is true always. We have discovered that there is a tremendous amount of self-imposed guilt and judgment and condemnation that humanity has brought upon itself based on its belief system, or the ego thought system, which we created. And it has absolutely nothing to do with a loving Father. It has absolutely nothing to do with an eternal God, or it has absolutely nothing to do with a God of love. And so we find ourselves in a world of illusion that we have created. And in this world of illusion, it is based on perceptions. In other words, it's based on interpretation. And we're basing our interpretation on the world that we see, the life that we think that we have. We're basing it on the belief in separation. So our starting point is from a place of falsehood. And if you start from a place of falsehood, how can you ever get in the place of truth? So there has to be what? There has to be a change. There has to be a change in foundation. There has to be a change in thought system. And so all of us at some point in our life have got to the point where we say, hey, this is not working. Something is not wrong. Something is not quite right here. And so we get to a point in our life where we say, absolutely, there has to be a better way. And then so we go on this search for finding that better way. And one of the results of two individuals whose life was totally at odds, totally very caustic, the relationship, as a result of them coming to a point where they say there's got to be a better way than this hatred, this bitterness, this separation, this division. And as a result of that, their agreement to find that better way, thus A Course in Miracles was born. And that's a whole story behind how that happened. But in 1977, this book was published for the sole purpose of helping us to wake up to the truth of reality and to bring the changeless continuity to our thinking. Because what has to happen is something has to happen in our thinking. And so we use A Course in Miracles as our main source for advanced spiritual teaching. So we're not talking elementary stuff here. This is very advanced, very advanced. If you followed us here, we are on day 168 on a 365-day journey of transformation. And we're glad you did. Or if you're just popping in and out on these messages, you will hear me say some things that are quite startling. You will hear me say some things that might, from your point of view, you might say, well, this is unbelievable. Or you may hear me say some things that causes you to think differently, or to what? I may say some things that remind you of what you already know intrinsically. And so, however you may enter into this space, it's not by chance. And we thank you for being here. So our the last lesson we left off was Workbook Lesson 164. And by the way, if you are a student of the Bible, I do use the Bible very extensively for some of the to help to support some of the ideas that are being brought forth in the workbook lessons in the Course in Miracles. But the Course in Miracles is a complete it is a workbook. It's a study lesson. And so it's a course. And so there's information that is shared. There's ideas that are shared. And then there's practices to be practiced, because it is in the practice of these advanced ideas that we come to find that they are true. And most of all, they are consistent. And they resonate to the very core of who we are. And so at the foundation of the Course teaching is that there is God and there is nothing else. That all things are of God. When we say God, if that's not the word or the description you use, whatever you use, a higher power, God, Jesus, Buddha, whatever resonate with you as the ultimate, that's what we're talking about. The one source that is responsible, empowers everything and sustains everything. Some call it the one love that we all share. But the whole idea and the foundation of the Course is that there is God and there is nothing else. And that in our existence, God is the source of our life. And in that existence, that God, in and of itself, what God created, he created like unto himself, and that which he created was himself. He extended himself and called himself the I am, or the Christ, or the terms that we use here in our project here. And so it is a collective. It's a collective, an all-encompassing idea that what God extended is likened to himself, or basically extending himself. And it is impossible for God, being the source of creation, to be separate from its creation. It's impossible for the creation of God to be separated from its source. So the basis for every idea that we share here is based on that this separation is impossible for a separation to occur between creator and creator. And based on that, that's the foundation, that what God created is likened to himself, and what God created remains with him, or with it or her. Because remember, here we talk about God as being what? Timeless and formless. So that which he created was timeless and formless. So we might ask, where did the time and where did the form come from? But if you've been around, you know that time and form is part of the belief in separation, which brought on a thought system, which brought on time and space, which brought on bodies, physicality, which was not a part of the original creation. And we also say in the basis of our belief of the ideas here is that, again, bodies A separate world, a world of multiplicity, is the result of a thought system of separation. And we said that God is not the author of that system or that world, but that the one mind that believed that it's separate is the one mind that made this world as you see it. Because remember, when we say the ultimate or the God of love or truth, we said, or reality, we say reality, that which is knowledge, all knowing, that which is truth, that is true always, that's which is one law, the law of God or the law of love. We said that reality is unalterable, meaning it can't be changed. What God is can't be changed. What God creates can't be changed. These are the foundational ideas that has to be consistent with a God that is consistent. God can't be fickle and flip and flop all over the place and hold the title of God. No. Even Scripture said, "I'm the Lord God, and I change not." And so we went on to describe reality as that which is eternal, meaning that what it has no beginning, it has no end. It always has been. We went on to describe, this supreme being as unambiguous, meaning it's not a smorgasbord of choices. There is no smorgasbord of choices. There's only the one choice. There's only the one will, and that's the will of God. We went on to describe reality as that which can be unrecognized. In other words, we can not recognize the reality of ourself or of our Creator. However, we can't change it. We can ignore it, or we can fall asleep to it and completely dream up a life and an experience that is separate from our Creator. But that doesn't make it real. It just makes it it makes it real to you in the moment. Like if you fall asleep and you start dreaming, in the dream it appears real to you in the dream, but in reality it's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. So that's kind of how this world has come about. It was dreamed up through our belief in separation. And so the whole idea here is that the mind that believes it's separated needs to be reconnected with reality. That's what we're doing in this process we call renewing the mind. And we also said that even though it can be unrecognized, reality can be, but it can't be changed. Everything that is created is created by God or love. God and love, the only one that can create. Creation has to do with extension. It has nothing to do with made. If something is made, it's not real, because if it's made, it has a beginning and an end. And anything that has a beginning and an end is not real. That which is real remain as it always is. That which is unreal, then consequently does not exist. Then we went on to say that reality is that which is beyond learning. What we're talking about here is not what can be learned, but it can be experienced. It can be known. So we're transcending this world of learning. We're transcending even vision and entered into a dimension of reality that we call knowing. We say it's beyond time and space. Reality is. We said that it has no beginning, has no end, and it has no opposite. What is real has no opposite. So that means it's not threatened by anything. That which is real is never threatened, or it never feels like it's under attack. Why? Because there's nothing else. So God never feels like he's under attack. Even when that which he created seemed to have separated itself from its source and gone on to make a world and a life of its own. God's not threatened by that. Why? Because it's only a fantasy. It's only an illusion. It's only a vain imagining. So this world that we're actually living in is not reality. It's a three-dimensional. It's not reality. It's based on time and space, and it's built on the idea of separation. Therefore, it has a beginning and an end. So it can't be reality. So this is not our home. This is not your home. We're journeying through the land of fantasy, through the land of a dream, through the land of a hallucination, temporarily, only to at some point wake up in our right mind to come to understand that that which we were created to be has not changed. We remain as God created us. And so what we're saying is reality merely exists. It is. And our experience of it is either reality or unreality. And so our last lesson, and I know that was a little long, lengthy foundation, but I know that I understand that the audience that listens to these workbook lessons consist of Course in Miracles students who embrace these ideas and have been studying Course in Miracles for years. And also this audience consists of those that are not, which can be a little startling, a little challenging, because I know some of the ideas brought forth here challenges the way we think, challenges the way we believe. But we're not here to challenge anything. We're here to share the truth. That's what a teacher of God does. We share the truth that is true always. And in so doing, when one practices the ideas, they come to find that they're true. So we have a direct experience of the truth. Jesus said, it is not the truth that sets you free, but it's the truth that you know that sets you free. And that knowing is very intimate. It's the truth that you have come intimately familiar with, that you practice. And so we have brought about some tremendous ideas these past 167 days that will absolutely blow the ego mind when it comes to identity or identification in terms of who we are. What did God create? God created himself. And so we have to embrace in truth that our true reality is where we're one with God. That's an absolute truth. Jesus in his 32, 33 years on the planet came with the message of oneness, that humanity and God are one, that there is no separation, that there is no sin, there is no guilt, there's no judgment. Jesus totally and completely eradicated that system. They call it the law. He made it of no effect. And then Paul picked up on it when he said that we are no longer what? We're no longer under the law of sin and death, meaning that sin and death doesn't exist. And he said it this way. He said, the law of the Spirit, of the law of oneness, the law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus has made us free from the law of sin and death. I think that's Romans 5:12, I believe it is. I could be wrong. But we're no longer in prison by a belief in sin and death. It doesn't exist anymore. No matter what your no matter what your training has been or what your thoughts may be about it, humanity is no longer under the law of sin and death. And in reality, never been under the law of sin and death. We just believed that we were. The Course says a tiny mad idea entered into the mind of God's creation and asked the question, what would it be like to be separate from God? And it's a preposterous question. Why? Because it's impossible to be separated from your source. So instead of laughing at the idea of separation, we took it seriously. And thus you have the world we see. And thus now we have, and then we accounted or gave God responsibility for the world that we see and for all the laws that are in the world and everything that has happened. And that's the farthest from truth. Why? God cannot create a world like this. It's opposite to his nature. It's impossible. So this is what we have made out of that mind that believed that it's separated. If you go back in way back in history, They said that's what the Big Bang was all about. The Big Bang theory, when it seemed like, something major happened. But the course teaches us that nothing really happened. We just fell asleep and dreamed this idea of separation, having a separate world with separate bodies, with a separate will. Everybody's got a social security number. And build a world based on the belief in separation. And thus you have all the institutions and all the industries and all the different arenas of life that are built on that separation. Thus you see why the world is in a mess. You see why that's how we got to the mess. Because we totally abandoned the oneness that we are and dreamed up the idea of a world of separation. And so we're in the process, as we have chosen these advanced teaching to be transformed, or actually is to but remember our original state, our original oneness with our Creator. And so it's called renewing the mind. It's called being born again. It's called the awakening. It's called enlightenment. Whatever, it doesn't matter what you call it. What's happening here is these individual selves are waking up to the only one reality that they always been, and that is one with our Father, one with God, one with each other. So Jesus came with the message of the fatherhood of God, that God is the Father of all reality. Notice now, he's not the father of unreality, he's the Father of reality. The father of unreality is a tiny mad idea in separation, and then we call that the ego thought system. You hear people say, well, they're into their ego. Well, 98% of the time, probably, or 98% of the 7.8 billion people on the planet are probably in their ego all the time. Meaning that they believe in separation. But the Course says that belief is a state of sleep. Because you cannot, in your right mind, believe in separation. It's impossible. It's preposterous, is the word that it uses. And so last week I started on Workbook Lesson 167, and we're in it. In this lesson, it says there is one life, and that one life we share with God. And so if that's the case, if what we are, God is, and what God is, we are, then God is life. And remember, we said in reality, there's no opposite. So if God is life, that means we're life, but it's not the life that we appear to be in these bodies, because we know these bodies eventually get laid down. But we have to embrace the reality is that we are timeless and formless beings, just like God. We're not bodies. We're what God is. We're not bodies. But there is the awareness that there's a body, that we are in this three-dimensional world expressing something. All of us are expressing something. We're either expressing the oneness of God, or we're expressing the belief in separation, or the ego. We're either expressing reality, or your life is expressing unreality. I mean, that's it. No multiple choices. It's only one choice, and that is the truth that is true always. Are we expressing that? Or are we supporting and endorsing the belief in separation? Thus you see the world of division and war and fighting and birth and death and up and down and in and out and multiplicity or duality. Subject object. In heaven or in oneness or in God, there is no duality. There is no subject object. There's just the one thing. And you are part of that one thing, and I'm a part of that one thing. So it takes a different way of thinking to embrace these realities. That's why it's called renewing the mind. In other words, bringing the mind back to its original state of being, where it thinks through reality. So again, this is advanced stuff. We're not talking elementary stuff here. And so in Workbook Lesson 167, it really deals with the elephant in the room. Y'all, you know what the elephant in the room is, right? Everybody know that. It's called. It's the D word. It's the D word, and I'm not talking about the devil because we already established that that's an illusion too. But the other D word, which is death, you know, the big elephant in the room, death. Nobody wants to really deal with it. But the Course does not ignore the elephant in the room. The Course has and instructs us to look at every illusion dead in the face so that we can what? Transcend the illusion. So the illusion can be dissolved into the nothingness that it is. So today we're going to look into this subject. We'll take a little detour. I'm not going to finish Workbook Lessons 167, but because it starts out by it's talking about the D word, death. Actually start out by talking about life. But it gets into this conversation about death, and I thought, hey, no one really deals with this, from the oneness point of view. I'm going to do it today. So stay here with me. We're going to all learn some things. So Workbook Lesson 167 starts out by saying there are no different kinds of life. And we talked about this on my last lesson. There's not a different kind of life. There's only life. Just like truth, there's no different kind of truth. There's only the truth. Like there's no different kinds of love. There's really only the one love. But we make up all these differences. We say, oh, we talk about levels, we talk about dimensions, we talk about, going to the next level or the next level. Even the scriptures say we go from glory to glory as though we're climbing a ladder. But all that is metaphoric, all that is symbolic of really our growing in consciousness or expanding our awareness. But it doesn't mean that levels and different kinds are real. It just means that as we grow and learn, we become aware of what's already there. And it appears that we're doing it on a timeline laterally. But in reality, all that there is always present right now. Everything that can exist is absolutely present, but we just may not be aware of it. Your right mind is present, but you may not be aware of it. The answers to your problems are present, but you may not be aware of it. All that you could ever ask or think is already present, but you may not be aware of it. So as you become aware of it, that's where the whole idea of up level or the whole idea of expansion or the whole idea of levels come from. But in reality, there are no levels, there are no differences. There's only the one. Okay? So it says there are no difference in the kinds of life, for life is like the truth. It does not have degrees. So there's no degree. Like you just got a little degree of it. In reality, everything is everything, and it's everything present. It's just a matter of what awareness, of consciousness to it. And that's what these workbook lessons are geared towards, to bring us into an awakened consciousness, or what we call Christ consciousness, or bring us to an awareness of what's already reality and already present for us to engage in. And the only block to that awareness is a mind that believes that it's individual aided, or a mind that believes that it's separate from its source. Consequently, it's separate from all other minds, as though there are individual minds. Well, I'm here to announce today, there are not individual minds. There's only the one mind that we share. There's only the one mind, and that's called the mind of God or the mind of Christ. But when there's a belief that you have split off from that and become an independent mind or individuated mind, or an individual. That mind is a counterfeit. It's not true. It's not real. And when we operate from that belief in separation, that what comes with that split is a belief in sin, guilt, and fear. And thus, from the belief in sin, guilt, and fear comes the idea of death. And all these you will see appear to be opposite of life. See, there is but the one life. There's no different kinds of life. But when there's this experience of a separate life, it's the experience of a dream. Because separation is impossible. So it's not a reality to be experimenting with the belief in separation. And thus we feel this sense of separation, this sense of anguish, this sense of mental and psychological separation and struggle. That's why you see all the division and strife and war and fighting and death and killing and all of the insane things that go on in this dream of separation. And we have thousands and thousands of years of recorded history of the agony of the complete disregard to life, disregard to equality, disregard to oneness. And you see the destructive results that come from that. But there is a real meaning, a real source. There's a real world. There's a real heaven. There's a real God. There's a real reality that has not been changed by any of that. It remains intact. It remains present. It remains available to everyone. And everyone, according to God's plan for salvation, will eventually wake up to this reality. He guarantees it, or it guarantees it, or she guarantees it. Remember, we don't talk genders here in the sense that, God is spirit. God is reality. God is beyond time and space. God is not a body. So there's no, we try to stay away from the pronouns. It's only part of the system to keep us from the truth. So God is not a he, she, or it. God is. Okay? And so it says there are no degrees. It is the one condition in which all that God created shares. So God is life and God is truth, and we all share that in reality. It says, like all of God's thoughts, it has no opposites. So life is, and there is no opposite to it. Truth is, and there is no opposite. So to experience something that appears to be the opposite of reality, you will have to experience in a dreamlike or an illusional or a fantasy type of way. It says there is no death, because what God creates shares his life in his life only. So if God is life, in biblical passages over in John said God is light, and in him, or in God, there is no darkness at all. There is nothing but light. And light is symbolic of life. Life is symbolic of extension and eternity. Life is symbolic of that which is changeless. So here it says there is no death, because what God creates shares his life. So death is an opposite. So it cannot be reality. So it's unreal. And here the course teaches that that which is unreal does not exist. So from the basis of that idea, death does not exist. Or if death does exist, that means that life does not exist, because there are no opposites. And that means that God would be the author of death. And so the whole idea of God being the author of death, where is the life? So it says there is no death. It says there is no death because an opposite to God does not exist. Quite the point. And then it says there is no death because the Father and the Son. That means that God and what God created, which is here just symbolic, the Son, just using the relationship of Father, Son, because we understand that the Creator and that which is created are likened to the same, has the same potential, can never be unchanged. In the natural, if you are the natural parents of a child, that can never be unchanged, even if the child or the parent walked away and say, "I'm not your father, or I'm not your son." You can say that, but it doesn't make it real. What's real is that you fathered the child, and the child became what you are, and that is changeless. Likewise, God created, uh, and it created what He called I am, and that's what we are. We are the I am, and you can never change that. Even if you build a whole world that appears that God ain't in it, it won't change the reality. And that's the whole basis of us going through this training, to get back to reality. Because at some point, all of us went on this prodigal journey. You know, you guys know the story about the prodigal son who left his father home, went out to the world, and got into riotous living and ended up in the pig pen, only to come to himself and say, "I'm going back home." Well, that is symbolic of all of our lives. We came here in this dream world of separation as on a journey, on a prodigal journey, to say, let's make something separate than what we were created. Can we make something else and create a world and make it of our own choosing, of our own free will? And you see the mess we have made. And one by one, humanity is what coming to himself and say, "What, there must be a better way." And when that happens, they wake up or begin the process of waking up to reality. And one way to do that is through what God has placed in all of us, and that is the remembrance of ourselves. And today, through Truly Foundation, it comes through the form of us teaching advanced teaching in A Course in Miracles. For me, it started in the world of Christianity, where I studied the Bible and became conscious to the fact that there is a God and there is a me, and there's something that is not right about it. And so I use my upbringing, and when I got to a point where uh, uh, I opened myself up to help bring all the clarity and all the understanding to my experience. So I've gone beyond the elementary things. I've gone beyond my past studies. And I've spent the last 32 years studying spirituality, and it has brought me to this point. And I love it. I love it. And so here it says there is no death 3 times. So if there's no death, it says you think that death is of the body. So that's the belief in separation comes with the fact that we believe that we're body identification. And so therefore we know the body is born and body dies. And that's very depressing. But all that is part of the belief in separation, where these ideas, opposite ideas of truth, opposite ideas of life comes in with that belief system. So we have to examine what we believe, why we believe it, and is it adding to or taking away from the quality of our life? That's what life journey is about. And so I have become a student of A Course in Miracles for the past 16, 17 years to help me put the puzzle together, get clarity on what is truth, what is reality, and what is not. And so now become a teacher of spirituality, advanced spirituality. And I love it. And I use my Bible, I use Course. Course is my primary resource, and other resources I use. Okay, but so it's not about the Course in Miracles, it's not about the Bible, it's not about a book. It's really about me intrinsically getting in touch with my reality and knowing within myself, you know, without a book or without a past or history, one can wake up to the truth. God has placed reality in everything. You can look at something. You can just look at something. And the one permanent teacher that is within all of us can teach us about our reality. God has placed eternity in everything. God can use anything. Just look around you. God can use any of these things around you to teach you the truth. You walk outside and you look up to this great dome that we live in. See the sky, the moon, the stars, the sun, the clouds, the trees, the animals. If you look at nature, nature will teach you about the truth that is true always. That there is but one God, one creator. There is but one life energizing all of this. All of it is just temporary. It's not real. This is not our home. That heaven is real. Heaven is intact. Heaven is not a place, but it's a state of mind. It's a state of being. And heaven is right here, right now. So I'm going to briefly turn to a section in the Course in Miracles on what is called the Manual for Teachers. And in the Manual of Teachers, it deals with certain subjects. Okay? And or may it be clarification of term. Let me find out what it is. It's in the Manual Teachers, and it's on page. It's on page 66. How about that? Highway 66. And it is number 27, and it's called What is Death? So we're going to look and see what the Course says about death. It's very important that we understand this. It says, what is death? Since the subject that is being really emphasized in the lesson 167 is saying that there is no death. Because the Bible says that God has not given us the spirit of fear, but a power and love of a sound mind. And it also goes on to say that fear has torment. And the belief in death is a fearful thought. And so that could be very tormenting if we don't have the proper perception about it. And so I'm gonna deal with it today. Or I'm not gonna deal with it. I'm going to see what the Course says about it. But the Course deals with it and deals with it very direct. And I think this information will help all of us to agree with what the Course says. There is no death. All right. So, what is death? It says death is the central dream. Notice now, it's the central dream. When we think about dreams, we don't think about reality. Death is the central unreality. It's the central unreality, which all illusions stem. In other words, it said the idea of death is a master illusion. And it's central to all other illusions. In other words, all other illusions are birthed out of the fact that death is real. Because remember, death is an idea of separation. That's what death means. Anytime something is separated from its source, it cannot survive. It cannot be sustained. You take a fish out of water and lay it out on the ground, and you pull it away from its source, its supply. It cannot breathe in oxygen. So, out of the water. And so eventually what happens? The life or the energy that animated that fish will eventually what? Not be present in that fish, and the fish will eventually what? Have no more life, have no more movement. Why? Because it was separated from its source. See, you can't whatever the source of a thing is, it has to remain what? Attached to it. Otherwise, it will what? It would lose the very energy that it is because everything that is created, that which creates it, is not separate from it, but it's one with it. And so God created us in his image and his likeness. And what was the image and likeness of God? Well, when God created humanity, God created a timeless and a formless being, meaning there was no body, there was no time and space, there was no matter. And the good thing is, you can't find out when humanity or what God created, when did it happen? Because if there's no beginning and there's no end to God, that means that what God is still, what he created is still himself. And it's always just God and nothing else. That's a big idea. I know to the natural mind, but in your knowing of knowings, you can embrace that. You can see that. You can resonate with that God is. And that God just stepped forward from itself. And that stepping forward, we call it what? Extension. And it's almost like God turned around, looked at himself and say, well, I am that. So the result in God creation is there's still God and there's nothing else. So if we are conscious and if we are aware, which is what God is, consciousness and awareness, if you're aware of, that you exist, that awareness is God. That consciousness that you have, that's God. Because God is awareness itself. God is consciousness itself. So the whole idea of death is what? Unconscious. Unawareness. So when we think that when the body becomes unconscious or unaware, that the body is dead, no. Consciousness and awareness hasn't gone anywhere. The body just is not animated by that consciousness or awareness. But we want to call it death. And that's not death. Why? Death would be the death of God. Ultimately. Death would be what? The lifelessness of God. And that's impossible. Because the whole concept of God goes away. So when we speak of death, it means that if there's any reality to death, the whole concept of life goes away. And that's impossible. And so it says death is the central dream in which all illusions stem. Every illusion is born out of the idea of death. It is not madness to think of life as being born. Okay, so that's why he said, is it not madness to think of life in this way? That one is born, one ages, one loses their vitality, and one dies in the end. Because if you look at the history of every body that is born in this three-dimensional world, that is its history. A body is born, a body ages, a body loses its vitality, and then a body, in the end, it dies. It's everybody's story. It's everybody's story. Notice that. But is that story true? Is that reality? Or is that a dream of separation? If you believe in body identification, then you believe that is basically your existence. That you were born, that you age, that you lose your vitality, and eventually what? You expire. And that's a very depressing thought. But we have to realize God did not create bodies. God created us timeless and formless. The I am that we are, the reality that we are, is that we are timeless and formless being, that we are awareness, that we're conscious. And that the bodies that we appear to be associated with. These bodies didn't come from life. These bodies actually come from the belief in death. It is our parents that made this idea of bodies, and you have one. Your bodies came from your parents, they come from God. Why? Because God only gives life. God can only give life. So the illusion of two other bodies coming together and creating another body, and the body eventually dies, that's not of God. That's not an idea of God. That is a dream of separation where death is the ultimate end. And so it's not real. And so when we wake up to the truth and transcend this whole idea, life really begins. And so there's no more what? There's no more what? Belief in sin, guilt, and fear. There's no more what? Fear of death. Why? Because death doesn't exist. But let me get into it. I'm jumping way ahead. It says, so it's madness to think that life is birth, aging, losing vitality, and dying. It says that's madness. That's ludicrous. That's depressing. That's why there's so much depression in the world, because that's what they see life as. When you see life as that, when you see your life as birth, aging, loss of vitality, and death, that is so depressing. And no wonder we have so much mental health in the world. No wonder we have so much psychological what? Suffering in the world. Because I would dare say that over 98% of people that are on this planet now believe in death as it's been real. And have not waken up to the truth. But that's why you're here listening to these lessons presented by Truly Foundation. And I'm delighted to be a part of this. Because I had to come to this realization for myself. And then I understood the joy of life. Yes, I can enjoy this life now. And so can everyone else. So we have asked this question before, but now we need to consider it more carefully. And that's what we're doing today. It is the one fixed, notice now, it is the one fixed, unchangeable belief of the world that all things in it are born only to die. It's the one fixed, unchangeable belief of the world, not of God now, of the world, of the belief that came out of the belief in separation, that all things in it must be born and only to die. This is regarded as the way of nature. Or they say this is natural, not to be raised to question and not question it. We put it up on the shelf. We just know expiration is coming, but if we could just put it up on the shelf and go out and have a party, we'll forget about it. But you never forget about it. You have to what? You have to confront it. You have to be about it. But let's find out what is really going on here. It says, but to be accepted as the natural law of life. Birth and death is the natural law of life. It is not the natural law of the life of God. It's the natural law of the belief in separation, but not the law of love or the law of God or the law of life. But there is no birth and there is no death. So this is another law that we have made. It's not the law of God. So the law of birth and death is the law that we have made out of a belief system that we have separated from our Creator and from each other. Why do you think we feel separate from one another? Where did that come from? Have you ever questioned that? Why is the world so divided? Why is it so separate? Why are there so many differences? Why is there so much strife and unloving acts going on in the world? Well, it's coming out of a belief system. It comes from a belief system. It says, this is regarded as the way of nature, not to be raised to question, but it is to be accepted as the natural law of life. The cyclical, that which cycles, and it says the changing, the world is cyclical. We have 4 seasons. It says that which changes, and everything in this world changes, right? It says the unsure. How much uncertainty is in the world right now? It says the undependable and the unsteady. Everything, nothing is stable, nothing is dependable. It says waxing and waning in a certain way upon a certain path, waxing and waning. Notice now, it's describing the world that we have made. It says all this is taken as the will of God. And it's not the will of God. This perceptual world is not the will of God. It's not the creation of God. And that's the biggest idea that we have to ultimately embrace. That which is what? Timeless and formless. Remain timeless and formless. That which is one remains one. That which is loving remains loving. That which is unchangeable remains unchangeable. So this world that we just described, that is cyclical, changing, unsure, undependable, unsteady, waxing and waning in a certain way upon a certain path, this is not the will of God. It's the will of man. It says, and no one acts if a benign, meaning a what? A loving creator could will such a world. No. But you've asked yourself, all of us said, God, if God is like this, man, I don't know if I want to hang out with him or her or it. But it's not like that. She's not like that. It's not like that. Reality and truth is not that way. So what is it then that we're experiencing? We're experiencing what appears to be the opposite of love. And if we're experiencing it, we have to be experiencing it in a dreamlike way or in a way of fantasy or hallucination. It's not real. This experience without a knowledge of the truth is an experience of what? Death. And we go out and try to find all these things, what? To mask the belief in death, the belief in sin and separation. We try to mask it with all kinds of events and activities in this world. So in this perception of the universe as God created it, and God did not create the universe as we see it. So it says in this perception, notice now, it's a perception, meaning it's an interpretation. We interpret the world we see and we say that God created it. That's the wrong basis. It says it would be impossible to think of God as loving based on the perception of this world that we see. It would be impossible for us to think of God as being loving. Why? Because we hold him responsible for this mess. And God is not responsible for the mess. We are. You are responsible for the mess that you make. Your children are responsible for the mess they make. Your neighbor is responsible for the mess he makes. The government is responsible for the mess that they've made. The religious community, guess what? You're responsible for the mess you made. In every arena of life, you're responsible for the mess you made. And the mess you made is based on a perception and a belief in separation. And we want to what? We want to make God responsible for it all. We want to make truth and reality responsible for it all. But I'm here to tell you, it's not responsible for none of it. We are responsible for all of it, and we need to come to grips with that. Otherwise, we'll deceive ourselves. We'll never find the truth. When we hold on to these false ideas, when we hold on to our false identity as being a body, when we hold on to the idea that separation is real, we hold on to the idea that there's death in life. When we hold on to the idea of duality, there is nothing but God, and there is nothing else. That is a oneness, single reality. God is, and there is nothing else. That has to be the conclusion. Because it is in that conclusion that everything else that appear in whatever form that it may appear in whatever time and space it may appear in, and in whatever degree it may appear in, it's only a dream. It's only an illusion. It's only temporary. When I say illusion, that means that it's only temporary. In other words, it appear to be here, but it's not. Why? Because it's going to pass away. That's why in Scripture, in New Testament, it tells you, do not look at the things that are seen. Your Bible, that's what it said. Don't look at the things that are seen. In other words, it's saying, if you're here, you can't help but look. But what it's saying is, don't form your opinion or your reality based on what you see. Why? Because tomorrow when you look, it's different. So where's the stability? It's no stability in it. So it says, look not at the things that are seen, but look at the things that are not seen. So how do you look at that which is not seen? That means what? There's a part of you that can see in the what? In the unseen. There's a part of you that is connected to that which is what? That is not form, and that is not of time. So it's about the way you think or what you think. He said, look not at the things that are not seen. Or he said, look at the things that are not seen, because the things that are seen are temporary. They're subject to change. They're not real. Like death is not real, subject to change. The life as we know it is not real. Why? It's subject to change. Aging, remember we talked about aging and loss of vitality. That's, and all of us experience that. That's the changing world. It's saying that is an illusion. It is subject to change. It's not real. It said, the Bible said, look not at that. Look not at your body identification, because you're not a body. It's depressing to think that you're a body and see the changes that goes on, to see the comings and the goings that goes on. No wonder there's so much depression and mental instability in the world, because it's the perception that we're holding. The course is here to help us correct our perception. Even the Bible says, be not conformed. Don't be conned by the world to get you to believe in birth and death, to get you to believe in scarcity and loss, to get you to believe in separation and division and body identification. Don't be conned by this world, but be ye what? They said, be not conformed. That's what it means. Don't be shaped into the believing system of the ego, but be what? Transformed. In other words, transcend, transfiguration. It has to happen to all of us. In other words, wake up to the truth of the reality that this physical world, and the world as we've been taught, and the world as we've been conditioned, isn't an absolute temporary experience. That's all it is. It's not the truth. We're not to attach ourselves to it. We're not to identify ourselves as it. Because we have to give up the reality and the truth of who we are as eternal beings of light in order to embrace a reality of temporary experience. And who would, in their right mind, would trade their eternal self for an illusionary self, for a temporary self that has a beginning and an end? Who would do that in their right mind? No one. And so we're here to so the course is here to set the record straight. He says, all this is not the will of God, and no one acts if a loving creator could will all of this. I'm asking. The course acts and it answers. This whole process that we're going through of renewing our mind is asking a lot of questions and answering the questions with truth. In this perception of the universe as God created it, it would be impossible to think of God as loving. For who has decreed that all things pass away, ending in dust and disappointment and despair, can but be feared. So a God that would create a world like this could not be anything but feared. Why would God create me to ultimately destroy me? That's the whole idea. You would have to fear an unloving father that would will something like this. It says, "For who can decree that all things pass away, ending in dust and disappointment and despair can but be feared. God holds you little life." It says, God holds your little life in his hand, but it says God holds your little life in his hand, but by a thread, ready to break it off without regret or care. Perhaps today, or maybe tomorrow, like they say. Well, you never know when your life gonna end. All the sayings. Death is ultimate. You have no promise for tomorrow. All of these things, that's where it comes. These ideas come out of that. Out of idea of an unloving father. Or if he waits, yet is the ending certain. Well, it's certain you're going to die. So you just better live it up while you're here. It said, who loves such a God? Who can love such a God? Knows not of love at all. Why? Because he has denied that life is real. And life is real means life is eternal. So who can love such a God that would create such a world that ends in dust, disappointment, despair, and despair? Who could love such a God? That's why a lot of people don't want to have anything to do with a God that would create such a world and put me here. And so that's their rationale for saying, I don't want to have anything to do with God. Why? Because God created this world and it's a mess. Who wants to have anything to do with an unloving father? And that's where that idea comes from. And then the other part of the population said, well, God is real. God is good. God created this. And if we can appease him enough through our religious practices, maybe God will have mercy on us and give us a place in his eternal home. That idea. And that's depressing too. So he says, who can love such a God? For there's birth and death. That means that God will be the God of the dead. But the Bible said that God is life. And Jesus said what? He's come that we may have life and have it more abundantly. So if something don't happen to these bodies after they die, we remain dead. So that's where the belief in the resurrection of the body comes in, which is an illusion also. Who wants to get back in one of these things? Who wants to experience one of these things again? So what? Resurrection of the body is not a God idea either. But many hold to that, and I understand where it comes from. It says death has become life's symbol. So in this view that death is real, death has become the symbol of life. It says, and his world is now a battleground where contradiction reigns and opposites make endless wars, which is what we're seeing. Where there is death, is peace impossible. So the belief in death says peace is what? Absolutely impossible. And that's why you see the lack of peace in the world, because the world believes in death. It believes in separation. And where the belief in separation is, there's war and fighting. There's no idea of oneness. And ultimately, in the back of everyone's mind, God is to blame for it. I'm so glad that Jesus got this help for us into the world so we can straighten our minds out. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. I'm happy about this too. But with this has some inspired revelation in it, but it also have a lot of ego. Lots of ego. And you have to be able to discern what the ego from the reality. And you have to be able to eat the meat and spit out the bones when you read this. The course is a tool, and it's not the only tool. There are many courses. There's many revelations that God has gotten into the earth through many different means. This is just the one that resonate with me. Because again, like I said, all this can be learned without a book, without assistance. All right. So death is a symbol. So death becomes the symbol of the fear of God. So if we believe, our belief system is based on the belief in separation. If it's based on the fact that sin is real, guilt is justified, and fear is our reward. And death is the ultimate. It says that this whole belief system that you and I hold is a symbol of fear. And that what we fear is we fear our creator. But then we say, well, we have to be in a relationship. How can you be in a relationship where God lives and you died? How can you be in a relationship where you were born and you died? Why did you do this to me? The question comes up. So you would have to know that if love is real, and it is, that this can't be the truth. This can't be a God idea. It says, death is a symbol of fear of God. His love is blotted out in this idea. In other words, there is no love in this idea that death is real. If God has anything to do with this, then love doesn't exist. If sin really exists, eternal life doesn't exist. If guilt really is justified, then the truth is changeless. It's fear. Is the mode of operation that we are to experience, then peace is destroyed. And if ultimately is death is the final say, then life really does not exist. And we're all doomed. That's a sad story. And it's a very sad story. But all of it, the good news is, all of it is what? All of it is in playing out as a story in the separated mind. And the mind has the ability to take the love and the power of God and energize a whole idea that is opposite or antithetical to what God is and what love is and what reality is. And that's what we've done. And so it is that mind and it is that thinking that is independent and separate, that has to be what brought back into the fold. So we bring this illusionary mind of this false self, this separated self, this world that we made. We bring that mind, we bring it to the truth. Notice now, we bring that to the truth. And that's what we're doing in these lessons. We're bringing all of our conditioning, all of our false beliefs, all of our dreams and all of our illusions and all of our fantasies and all of our hallucinations that are based on separation. That's based on the idea that God is an unloving father, that God is an unloving father to create such a world. We're bringing all of those illusions to the truth. And then what is the truth? God is, and there is nothing else. All else is a counterfeit. It's a lie. It's designed to keep you from the truth. It's designed to rob you of your peace and your joy and your happiness. And it has done a good job. That's being conformed to this world. And the world basically is a false idea about who you are. So it really gets down to a question of identity. Who are you? Who are you without your body? Who are you without your birth certificate? Who are you without your personal experiences? Who are you without the honor that has come from men, that has been bestowed upon you? Who are you? Who are you without the systems of this world? Who are you without your cash? Or who are you without your poverty? Who are you without your nationality? Who are you without your gender? Who are you without your political party? Who are you without your skill set? Without your smarts? Who do you say that you are? Who are you? Before you were formed in your mother's womb. If you can remember in Jeremiah said, God said to Jeremiah, I knew you, Jeremiah, the prophet, soon to be prophet. He said, Jeremiah, I knew you. Notice the word, notice now. God was saying that Jeremiah, you existed before time and space and before form. And it's in that existence is your reality. That's what God was saying. That you are a formless. In reality, he was saying, Jeremiah, you are a formless and timeless being. You were created before the world was, or before the illusion came about, or before the belief in separation it started. He said, that's what I knew. He said, you existed. In other words, you had consciousness and you had awareness before you was formed in your mother's womb. So that's how God related to Jeremiah in that statement. He related to his reality. So I want to relate to you in your reality. And it may not ever been done before for you, but I'm going to do it right now. So I say to you, anyone that's viewing this, in your reality, you existed before you was formed in your mother's womb. Therefore, you are a timeless and a formless being. That's your reality. You were conscious before you was formed in your mom and daddy's womb. In fact, you weren't formed in their womb. What was formed in your mother's womb was a body that was formed out of the belief in death and separation. And so what our parents actually gave us in terms of the body is death. But what animated the body and gave the body life, or the appearance of life, is that which you were prior to being formed. And so in reality, your true identification is not the body that you appear to be associated with. There's an idea of the body. And who you really are is not in the body. But who you really are is aware that there is a body. So the body is in your awareness, it's in your consciousness. There's no way, that flesh and blood and bone and dust and sinew can hold that which God created. It's impossible. In fact, it says flesh and blood cannot inherit reality. So that means that you're only aware of a John Doe. You're only aware of a Susan or a Jane. It's been a physical existence. And you call that yourself, but it's not yourself. It is what you found yourself, or thought yourself to be when you fell asleep to the reality of your true identity. So all of us come here in a state of sleep, not in a state of awake. Because we have to fall asleep in order to dream up the idea of, like the prodigal son said, what would it be like to be separate from God, or what it would be like to be in a body. And so thus we have the experience, not in reality, but in unreality. But your reality remains intact. Who you are remains unchanged. Remember, you are a creation from God. So therefore, you are unchanging. You are unaltered. Your reality is never being affected about anything that happens in the dream, by sin or guilt or fear or judgment or condemnation. That's why Paul said, there is now therefore no condemnation in them that are what? In their reality. And he calls it Christ. In Christ. That's your reality. In their original state of mind. There's no condemnation to the one that wakes up to the truth. There is no sin. There is no judgment. There is no guilt. And there is no death for the one that wakes up to the reality. And that's what we're doing here. Because you remain, I remain as God created us. That has not been tainted. That has not been affected at all by the dream. Just like in the natural, when you go to bed at night and you dream a dream, you have a nightmare, or you may even have a good dream where you become this grand billionaire or whatever your dream is. Or you may be chased all night by the boogeyman or the lion or the tiger or the bear. Regardless of the content of the dream, the whole idea is that you're dreaming. It's not real. So when you lay down at night and you have a nightmare or you have a good dream, but when you wake up in the morning and realize, it was only a dream. It was only an illusion. It wasn't real. I'm here in my bed. I wasn't chased all night. I'm still in my bungalow. I'm not the multi-billionaire I dreamed. But you wake up from that dream and realize that nothing has changed. Well, likewise, we're in a dream state that we need to wake up from in this world, believing in body identification, believing that we're separate from each other and from God. We need to wake up from that sleeping state to the reality of oneness that God is, and we're a part of that which God is. That's what awakening is. That's what to be born again is. That's what to be enlightened is. It's but a recognition that I had forgotten something, but now I remember. It's in that remembrance that all is well, that I'm still eternal, that I'm still God's son and daughter. I'm still God's creation. I'm still timeless and formless. So the life I must be living now in this awakened state. Jesus called it a resurrection. So now you live a resurrected life. You live the life of Christ. Because you no longer live, but like Paul said, it's I no longer live, but it's Christ that lives as me. So the life I live appearing here on this three-dimensional level is the life of Christ. So I am the Christ. I'm the light of the world, like Jesus said. I'm into my real self now. There is no beginning. There's no end to me. Sickness, disease, poverty, lack, separation. These are all what? Illusions. I'm not subject to those laws anymore. I've transcended the law of sin and death. I've transcended the belief in separation. I've transcended death. So it says, his love is blotted out in the idea of death, which holds it from awareness like a shield held up to cover up the sun. The grimness of the symbol is enough to show it cannot coexist with God. Death cannot coexist with life. It holds an image of what God created, which is us, in which he is laid to rest in devastation's arm, where worms wait to greet him and to last a little while by his destruction. Yet even the worms as well are doomed to be destroyed as certainly. And so do all things live. And so do all things live because of death, devouring its nature. Devouring is nature's law of life. God is insane and fear alone is real. That's the conclusion that we come to in the process called death. And that's insanity. That's depressing. And most of us either continue to hold that idea where we're gripped in the fear of death, or we have awakened to reality and say there is no death. Just like the Course says, there is no death. The Bible hints at it a little bit when it says what? Death is the final enemy. Death shall be swallowed up with life. Oh, death, where's your sting? Oh, death, where's your victory? But that speaks of a resurrected body. So that's about the resurrection of that body in a different form. So that's still the idea of separation, because now you're still going to have all these billions of bodies separate. So that's still feeding to the ego's idea that we're not one with God. So he got close at it. He was in the right direction, but didn't go all the way. Well, we're going all the way into this. Death is impossible. Bodily inheritance is impossible. We're not bodies. That's part of the dream. That's part of the whole idea of separation. So even in our religion, it will still try to point us toward an individuated bodily identification. You gotta question that. That's still playing to the idea that I done broke off from the masterpiece. You will never break off from the masterpiece. Why? Because it's impossible. God would have to break himself off. He didn't try that before, falling off the wall and breaking into billions and billions of pieces called bodies. And now we found out that was only a dream. Humpty Dumpty never fell off the wall. In fact, Humpty Dumpty was never on the wall. So, the curious, notice now it says, the curious belief that there is part of dying things that may go on apart from what will die does not proclaim a loving God nor reestablish any grounds for trust. That's why this belief in the resurrection of individual bodies, it doesn't hold water with truth. It says, if death is real, for anyone, notice now, if death is real for anyone or anything, there is no life. Death denies life. But if there is reality in life, death is denied. In other words, there is no death. It got to be one or the other. One is true and one is false. Truth is truth. So if death has any idea in the conversation, that's the spirit of confusion, and it's not true. God is life. And that's it, period. God is, period. There's no conversation to have about death, birth, or death. God is, and there is nothing else. Do you embrace that reality? Or are we still living in the reality of fearing this idea that God did it, including death? And in that thought, it says, therein lies fear and torment. Where did it come from? Came from the big lie. But if there is reality in life, death is denied. No compromise in this is possible. Remember, there are no opposites in truth. There's no opposites in God. God is life, so there's no opposite. God is love, there is no opposite. God is eternal. God is truth. God is knowledge. There is no opposite. God is one law. There is no opposite. God is changeless. God is unalterable. God creates only love and reality. God is beyond learning. God is what? Has no beginning and no end. God merely is. Therefore, if that be true, what I described about God, I described about myself. Because I'm in God, I in him, he in me, we're one. That's the message that Jesus came to bring. That we are. God is our only reality. And if God is our only reality, there's no place in the conversation for the belief in death. In the conversation, the only thing that needs to be addressed is us waking up from a state of being asleep to our reality. That's the only conversation that needs to be had. That we should awake to reality. Like Paul said, wake to righteousness. Sin is not real. Fear and guilt is not real. Death is not real. Oh, death, where is your sting? See, he's getting it a little. Where's your sting? You've been swallowed up in the truth. You've been swallowed up in life. And that's why I said earlier, we bring our illusions to the truth. We bring all our culture, all our nationalism, all our internationalism, all our humanity, and what we have made, we bring that to the truth. And we allow the light to shine upon that so that it can shine it away. Because it's only an illusion. So when we wake up to our reality, death is no longer an idea. The only thing that is an idea is life, and life more abundantly. That's what Jesus was talking about. I came to bring you life. How does life come? It comes through the knowledge of the truth. Truth is our only solution to this upside down orientation, to this inside out world that we made. It's the only solution. It's the only solution to fear and guilt and sin consciousness. It's the only solution to judgment. It's the only solution to all the problems in the world. To bring the illusions to the truth. That means every area of life, government, religion, sports, entertainment, culture, everything in life is being brought to the truth. And that's why you see the life right now, like it's falling apart. It's not falling apart. It's going through transition. You think life is falling apart. You think the world is going to hell in a handbasket. No, the world's been delivered from that. The world has been set free as we individually wake up to the truth of who we are and begin to hold the space of truth. It don't take billions to do that. It only takes one. And you are that one. When you wake up to the truth of your reality, that you are life and life only, that you are one with the Creator, that you are one with all of life, and you hold that idea in your own mind as you join with the mind of God or the mind of Christ, you are having such a transformation, such a transformational impact on the world. You don't know what happens when you wake up to the truth. You don't know the impact that you're having in the environment that you're in, around the people that you are. They know it, they feel it, they sense it. Something is happening. And it opens up a portal for them to consider and to question. Because now we are part of God's plan of salvation, whereby we represent the light of the world. We become saviors of the world, like our elder brother Jesus. Not as evangelists to go out and browbeat people with religion, no. But we become what? We become like high priest. And that in your quiet time, in your meditation, in your prayer time, as you hold these realities as self-evidence in your own life, you are opening up a portal in the minds of others, sitting in your own little quiet space, holding on to the truth that is true always. And when you go out into the community, and when you go out among people, the love that you are, the way you show up in the world as the light of the world, in your non-judgmental way, as you show up and you're forgiving of all things, even the entire world. You are that son that is setting the world free. For who the son set free, or who the God who have awakened to God reality, who they set free is free indeed. So we would lead as an awakened being. We forgive the entire world. We say the world is innocent. But y'all say, no, the world is guilty. Look at all of this and that. Look at what's happening in the dream. Notice now what you're saying. Look what's happening in the dream. The world is forgiven. Even God said through Paul that he was in Christ, reconciling the world back into himself. So if God has reconciled the world back into himself, do you think that God is holding the world in a place of guilt? No, God reconciled the world back into himself. Why? Because there's nothing but innocence. The original innocence is all that God knows of. God doesn't know of separation. God doesn't know of sin or guilt or fear or death. These are man-made ideas that have come from the belief in separation. God knows none of this. God only hopes the thoughts of God. That's why he said, my thoughts are not your thoughts. My ways are not your ways. These are your ways. And these are the ways of death. And so God placed within all of us in the dream our own Holy Spirit, our own internal teacher, to wake us up to our true reality. And God even allowed anyone that would answer the call to be a teacher or a spokesman for reality, to develop a portal and a voice in the world to say, hey, this is the truth that's true always. And that's what we're doing here at Truly Foundation. So it says, no compromise in this is possible. There is either a God of fear or one of love. The world attempts 1,000 compromises and will attempt 1,000 more. Not one can be acceptable to God's teachers. Like, I don't embrace any of that anymore. None of it is acceptable. It says, because not one could be acceptable to God. If it's not acceptable to God, it's not acceptable to me. And it shouldn't be acceptable to you. If it's not acceptable to truth or love, it shouldn't be acceptable to you. So when we look into a world that is unloving, that is judgmental and unforgiving, it's not acceptable unto you. It's the truth. It says, he did not make death because he did not make fear. God did not make death because God did not make fear. Both are equally meaningless to God. Fear and death is meaningless to God. Why? He didn't make it. He didn't create it. It has no meaning to him. So as we are over here dreaming of death and being what? Extremely fearful. God said it's meaningless. He said it's meaningless. What's going on? I didn't create that. Remember when we walked in the garden in the cool of the day and asked Adam, where are you? Adam said, I was afraid. God said, afraid? Who told you that? God never had anything to do with death, separation, fear, guilt, judgment, lack, poverty, sickness, death, disease, beginnings, endings. Nothing. This is all a dream in humanity's mind. And the only solution to it is the truth. So today we bring the truth. We bring the illusion of death to the truth. So no one has to be fearful. And I hope this is helpful. I have a little bit of time left, so I'm going to read through this. But you can always go back to this section in the Course in Miracles under the Manual for Teachers on page 66 under the question, what is death? And read it for yourself. Okay? It says, the reality of death is firmly rooted in the belief that God's Son is a body. So the belief in death is rooted in the idea that we believe that we are bodies. It's rooted in that. And if God created bodies, which he didn't, remember I say our bodies come from within the dream from our parents. It came from other body identifications. It didn't come from God. Because remember, God is not body. God is not time. And neither are you and me in our real state. He said, and if God created bodies, death would indeed be real. But he didn't, or she didn't, or it didn't. But God would not be loving to create these separate bodies that are born to die. That is not loving and very needful. You ever notice how needy the body is? How much attention you have to pay to the body, that the body becomes the central theme in the dream. The body is the central theme in the dream. And the body is designed as an attack on God. It's a symbol of death. It's a symbol of separation and fear. Notice now. He says, but God would not be loving. There is no point at which the contrast between the perception of the real world and that of the world of illusions become more sharply evident. It is the most evident that the perception of this world of separation and the real world of our reality are in more contrast, no other place like in this idea of death. Death is indeed the death of God, is what it would say. If he is love. Because to say that death is real is to say that love is not. But we're saying that love is real and death is not. That God is real and what? Death is not. That we are real because we're one with God. We share the same life and the being and the reality that God is. And so because God is real and we are real, death is not. Death is not real for you or for anyone for that matter. Even if you don't know it, it's still not real. Not knowing it don't make it real. Not knowing causes you to dream of it being real, but it's only in a dream. Thank God. It says, death is indeed the death of God, if he is love. And now his own creation must stand in fear of him. He is not father, but destroyer. He is not creator, but avenger. Terrible his thoughts and fearful his image. To look on his creation is to die. What a sad story. But it's just a story. It's not the truth. And the last to be overcome will be death. Of course, without the idea of death, there is no world. All dreams will end with this one. This is salvation's final goal, the end of all illusions. And in death are all illusions born. What can be born of death and still have life? But what is born of God is still can die. The inconsistencies, the comparisons, and the rituals of the world fosters in its vain attempt to cling to death and yet to think love real are mindless magic, ineffective and meaningless. God is, and in all mindless magic, God is, and in God all created things must be eternal. Do you not see that otherwise God has an opposite, and fear would be as real as love? You got to embrace the truth. You got to accept the truth for what it is. That God is love, and therefore there is no death. Teacher of God, talking to those of us who have embraced the reality and said yes to the call to teach the truth or to share the truth. It says, your one assignment could be stated thus: accept no compromise in which death plays a part. Do not believe in cruelty, nor let attack conceal the truth from you. This is for all of us. What seems to die has but been misperceived and carried to illusions. Now it becomes your task to let the illusion be carried to the truth. Be steadfast. Be steadfast. But in this, be not deceived by the reality of any changing form. Be not deceived by the form of body identification. He said it's changing form. That means it's not real. Be not deceived by it. Don't base your convictions on it. Investigate it for yourself. It makes no sense. Death is not real. It says, truth neither moves nor wavers. I'm the Lord God, I change not. Nor sinks down to death and disillusion. And what is the end of death? Is the question. Nothing but this. This is the end of the idea of death. And that is that the real, notice now, the realization that what God created, which is you and me, is completely guiltless now and forever. And we've always been guiltless and sinless. And we've always been whole and complete until, and it's not an until, but because we fell into a trance of sleeping and dreaming of separation, that we had the experience, but we're not our experience. It's just what we experienced in dreams, but they're not real. But the only thing that is real is that you are sinless and that you are guiltless. And in your sinlessness and in your guiltlessness, there is no fear. The only way you can fear and fear death is that you believe that you're guilty and you're separated from God. That is impossible. But that is the answer. and that's your way out of the nightmare. That's your way to remove the conversation of death out of your what? Out of your life. It says nothing but this. Nothing. This is the truth that is true always. You remain as God created you. Whole and complete. Holy. Blameless. Like Paul said, before the foundation of the world. He said that God created us, appointed us, chosen us to be in him before the foundation of the world. How? Holy and without blame before God in love. And you remain that way. I remain that way. All humanity remain that way. There is no exception. And eventually all humanity will wake up to that to that realization. So all humanity will wake up from the dream. And when you wake up from the dream, reality hasn't changed. In fact, while you was dreaming, it's like the little child in the room dreaming, and you were standing there watching her. Their reality has not changed. They are safe at home with mommy and daddy, not being chased by the lion, tiger, or the bear. The lion, tiger, or the bear represents death chasing us. It says, but do not let yourself forget it. Do not let yourself forget it is not less than this. You are the guiltless, the sinless, the holy creation of God. And that will never change. Even a dream of separation can change that. Even 1,000 lifetimes lived, believing in death, being fearful, having all kinds of tragedies and trauma, and it feels real, it looks real, it sounds real. You can live 1,000 of those lifetimes, and that won't change your true reality. You are life, and that's all you can be. And when you wake up to that, that's all you will experience. That's what Jesus means. He said, "What? Let it be on earth as it is in As it is in heaven." How is it? Changeless, guiltless, fearless, deathless, no lack, no sickness, no disease. Where's heaven? It ain't some place you go to. It's an awakened state. It's Christ consciousness. It's the mind of God. And it's now present. It's everywhere present. It's right here, right now. And so I have addressed the big elephant in the room. And now the big elephant has disappeared. Don't dream it back up. Stay transformed. Don't be conned anymore. Stay transformed. There is no death. There's only life, and life abundantly. Thank you so much. I will be back to finish up lesson 167 for those that are following in the course. But for those that may be just listening to this, I know this will help. And if you want more information about how you can become a student of these realities, just inbox me. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.